The general's confession came in a voice hoarse with shame, recorded on a device small enough to fit in Claire Mendoza's palm. But that was 3 days from now, and the story really begins on the morning her husband's military dog refused to stop digging at the floor of their bedroom closet. The scratching woke Claire at 0400, persistent and methodical, claws against hardwood that had survived 15 years of Marine Corps moves and 2 deployments. She found Sargent in the walk-in closet, a 90-pound German shepherd with a black coat, amber eyes, and 3 service ribbons worth of scars beneath his fur. He was digging at the corner where David's uniforms used to hang, the space now empty except for shadows and the smell of cedar. "Sarge, enough." Her voice came out rougher than intended. The dog looked at her, whined once, a sound she'd learned meant important, urgent. "Listen," then resumed digging. Claire Mendoza stood 5'7" in David's old PT shirt and flannel pants, her frame whittled lean by grief and the physical labor of the horse ranch she'd inherited from her father. At 36, her dark blonde hair showed threads of premature gray she didn't bother hiding, and her hazel eyes carried the particular weariness of military widows who'd been handed a folded flag and a rehearsed apology. A thin scar traced her left forearm from a riding accident years ago, back when injuries could still be explained by accidents instead of loss. She knelt beside Sargent. The dog had come home with David's effects 8 months ago, shipped from Kandahar with a medal, a service record, and behavioral notes that used words like bonded, loyal, and potential PTSD response to loud noises. What the paperwork hadn't mentioned was that Sargent had been with David when he died, that the dog had tried to drag her husband to safety after the IED, that he'd stayed beside the body until the medevac arrived. Some things you didn't learn from paperwork. You learned them at 0300 when the dog woke from nightmares, whining David's name in whatever language dogs spoke to ghosts. "What is it, boy?" She ran her hand over the floorboards. "Solid." Then her fingers found it, a seam, barely visible, where the boards lifted. Not damage. Design. Her pulse kicked. She pried up the section. Beneath, set into the concrete foundation, was a floor safe. Military gray, combination lock. Nothing remarkable except she'd lived in this house for 6 years and never known it existed. David's secrets. Her husband, who told her everything, or so she believed. Sargent sat, alert, waiting. Leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from, and whether you've ever discovered something that changed everything you thought you knew. Claire tried the combination she knew by heart, their anniversary. Nothing. David's birthday. Nothing. The day they'd met. Still nothing. Her phone buzzed. Text from Marcus Webb, David's former commanding officer, now retired and running security for some defense contractor. "Can we talk?" Important. About David. The timing felt wrong, calculated. She'd barely spoken to Marcus since the funeral, where he delivered the eulogy with the same crisp precision he'd probably used for 100 other dead Marines. Professional grief, nothing personal. She typed back, "Not a good time." His response came immediately. "It's about what David found in Kandahar. People are asking questions. Be careful." Her hands went cold. The doorbell rang. Through the bedroom window, she saw the black sedan in her driveway, government plates, official as death. 2 men in suits stood on her porch, badges already out. Sargent growled low, the sound that meant threat, danger, protect. Claire moved fast, pulling on jeans, boots, David's old denim jacket. She grabbed her phone, slipped it in her pocket, then looked at the safe. No time to figure it out now. She replaced the floorboards, kicked David's duffel bag over the spot. Downstairs, she opened the door to 2 defense intelligence agents who showed her credentials and polite smiles. That didn't reach their eyes. "Mrs. Mendoza, I'm Agent Torres. This is Agent Kim. We need to ask you some questions about your husband's final deployment. David died 8 months ago. I've answered every question. New information has come to light." Torres was maybe 40, with the bland competence of career bureaucrats who specialized in making problems disappear. "May we come in?" "No." Claire kept her hand on Sargent's collar. The dog was rigid, focused, reading the men the way he'd been trained to read threats in Afghan villages. "You can ask questions from there." Torres's smile thinned. "Did your husband send you anything from Afghanistan? Files, documents, storage devices?" "His personal effects came through official channels. You know that. What about communications? Encrypted emails?" phone calls where he mentioned classified operations. David followed protocol. Her voice stayed level, but her mind was racing. The safe. Whatever was in that safe, these men wanted it badly enough to show up at dawn. Mrs. Mendoza, your husband may have taken materials that pose a national security risk. If you're withholding evidence, get off my property. Agent Kim spoke for the first time, his voice softer, more dangerous. We can come back with warrants. Make this difficult. Or you can cooperate, and we all walk away clean. Sergeant's growl escalated. My dog doesn't like you, Claire said quietly. Neither do I. If you want to search my house, bring your warrants. Until then, leave. They left, but Torres turned at the car. 24 hours, Mrs. Mendoza. Then we do this the hard way. Claire watched until they disappeared down the ranch road, then ran back upstairs. The safe sat waiting, holding answers she suddenly needed desperately. She tried every combination she could think of, military ID numbers, coordinates, metal citations. Nothing worked. Sergeant paced, agitated, then did something strange. He positioned himself in front of the safe and barked. Once, pause. Twice, pause. 3 times, long pause, 4 times. 1-2-3-4, a sequence. Claire stared at the dog, then at the safe, then pulled out her phone and opened the photos she'd never been able to delete. Found the one from David's last leave. The 2 of them on the porch, Sergeant between them. Everyone smiling like they had forever. David's hand rested on Sergeant's head, and she could see it now, his finger pointing down at the dog's collar, deliberate, meaningful. She thought he was just posing, but David never did anything without purpose. She needed that collar. The one Sergeant wore now was new, issued after David's death. The original collar was in the box of effects the Corps had sent home, the box she'd shoved in the barn because looking at it felt like drowning. She ran for the barn, Sergeant at her heels, and pulled down the box with shaking hands. Inside, David's dog tags, his wedding band removed at the morgue, his watch stopped at 13:47, and beneath it all, Sergeant's collar. The brass plate had a name and service number, but underneath, scratched faint, were numbers, 23-41-07. Claire ran back to the house, spun the dial, 23 right, 41 left, 07 right. The safe opened. Inside were 3 items, a laptop, a stack of folders marked classified, and a small digital recorder. She picked up the recorder, saw David's handwriting on the tape label, for Claire. If anything happens. Her hand shook as she pressed play. David's voice filled the bedroom, and she had to sit down, had to breathe through the knife-sharp pain of hearing him alive again. Claire, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. A pause, background noise, generators, distant voices, Afghanistan. I found something. Evidence of weapons deals, money laundering, corruption that goes to the highest levels. General Morrison is selling intelligence to contractors, getting soldiers killed for profit. I have proof. But if I report it through channels, it disappears. Morrison controls those channels. Static. I'm sending this home with Sarge. He'll know when it's time. He'll show you. Baby, you need to get this to someone outside the chain of command. A journalist, a congressman, someone Morrison can't touch. And Claire, be careful. If they know you have this, they'll come for you. The recording ended. Claire sat in the silence, understanding flooding in like ice water. David hadn't died in a random attack. He'd been killed. Because he'd seen too much, knew too much. And now she had the evidence that could destroy a general's career, or get her killed. Sergeant pressed against her leg, solid and certain. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. You opened the safe. Big mistake. Last chance to walk away. They were watching. They'd been watching. Claire looked at the laptop, the files, the recorder. Then she looked at Sergeant, at his scarred face and amber eyes that had seen her husband die. Okay, she whispered. Let's finish what he started. She had no idea that in 48 hours, she'd be face to face with General Morrison himself, where that sergeant would be the only thing standing between her and a bullet. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. David had trusted her to do this, and she'd never failed him yet. Claire drove to the public library in town, 40 minutes of mountain roads with Sergeant in the passenger seat and her eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. No tail that she could see, but her hands stayed tight on the wheel. David's laptop sat in a backpack between her feet, password protected, encrypted, deadly. The library offered two things she needed: public Wi-Fi that couldn't be traced to her ranch, and security cameras that meant she couldn't disappear quietly if anyone tried. She sat up at a corner table, back to the wall, Sergeant lying at her feet where he could watch the entrance. The laptop took 20 minutes to crack. She tried every password variation until David's mother's maiden name plus their wedding date worked. The files opened like Pandora's box. Financial records, email chains, photographs of General Theodore Morrison shaking hands with men Claire recognized from news reports, arms dealers, defense contractors under investigation, a Saudi prince linked to extremist funding, shipping manifests for weapons that never reached their intended units, after-action reports that had been altered, casualties blamed on Taliban attacks when the real cause was faulty equipment sold at premium prices by Morrison's partners, and transcripts, intersected communications showing Morrison had leaked patrol routes to insurgents, getting soldiers killed to eliminate witnesses or create chaos that justified more contracts. David's voice on audio files, recorded secretly, confronting Morrison in Kandahar. "I know what you've done, sir. I have the proof. Turn yourself in, or I release everything." Morrison's response, cold as death. "Captain Mendoza, you're making a fatal mistake." 3 days later, David's convoy hit an IED. Except the route had been classified. Only Morrison's office knew it. Claire's vision blurred. She forced herself to breathe, to think like David would have thought. Tactical. Strategic. Who could she trust? Not the military. Morrison had allies, people who'd protected him for years. Not local law enforcement. Too small, too easily pressured. She opened a browser, searched for investigative journalists who'd broken military corruption stories. Found 3 names. Started composing an encrypted email, attaching files, when Sergeant's low growl froze her fingers on the keyboard. Agent Torres stood 10 feet away, browsing the mystery section with the studied casualness of someone who wasn't actually reading titles. Claire closed the laptop, slipped it in the backpack. Stood slowly. Torres looked up, feigned surprise. "Mrs. Mendoza. Small world. Where you followed me. We're concerned for your safety." He moved closer. Sergeant's growl intensified. "David made powerful enemies. You're in danger as long as you have those files. Then I should make them public. Safest thing to do." "It's not that simple." Torres's voice dropped. "General Morrison has friends in Congress, Pentagon, CIA. You release those files, you'll be arrested for mishandling classified information before any charges stick to him. You'll lose everything: ranch, freedom, your husband's reputation. They'll paint David as a traitor who stole secrets." The threat landed clean and hard. "But there's another way," Torres continued. "Give me the files. I can get them to the right people quietly. Morrison retires, you stay safe, David's honor stays intact. Everyone wins." Claire studied his face. "Except justice. Justice is overrated when you're dead." Torres's hand moved to his jacket. "I'm trying to help you." "No, you're trying to protect Morrison." Claire backed toward the exit, Sergeant moving with her, 100 pounds of trained aggression between her and the agent. David didn't die, so his evidence could disappear quietly. "Mrs. Mendoza," she ran. Out the library, into the parking lot, Sergeant ahead of her, scanning for threats. She threw the backpack in the truck, started the engine, and was pulling out when Torres appeared in the doorway, phone to his ear. She drove fast, taking back roads, no destination except away. Her hands shook on the wheel. Torres was right about one thing. She was out of her depth. A horse rancher against generals and government agents. David had been trained for this kind of fight. She wasn't. But she had Sergeant. And she had the evidence. Her phone rang, Marcus Webb's number. She almost didn't answer, but something in her gut said she needed to hear what he had to say. "Claire, where are you?" Marcus's voice was urgent. "Torres just called. Said you're uncooperative, possibly unstable. He's getting authorization to bring you in." "Marcus, did you know? About Morrison?" Silence. Then, "I suspected. Never had proof. David was getting close to something. Then he died. And I thought it was over. It's not over. I have everything. David left it for me." "Jesus." Marcus exhaled hard. "Listen carefully. Morrison knows. He's been watching your house, your phone, waiting to see what you'd do. Torres isn't DI. He's private security, working for Morrison's contractors. They'll kill you and make it look like grief-driven suicide. You can't go home. The world tilted. Then what do I do? Fort Carson, Colorado Springs. 2 hours north. I have a contact there, Colonel Sarah Chun, Inspector General's office. She's clean, untouchable, been investigating Morrison for months, but couldn't get evidence. You bring her those files, she can protect you and prosecute him. Marcus's voice turned gentle. Claire, David trusted me. Trust me now. I'll meet you at Carson's main gate at 1700 hours. Don't stop. Don't call anyone else. Just drive. She hung up, checked the mirror. No tail. Yet. Sergeant whined, pressed his nose against her arm. The gesture David had called grounding. The dog's way of saying I'm here. You're not alone. Okay, boy. Colorado it is. The drive took 3 hours through mountain passes and high desert. Claire stopped once at a gas station, used cash, kept Sergeant close. The clerk gave them a strange look. Woman alone, military dog, backpack, clutched like life itself. But he took her money and said nothing. She reached Fort Carson at 1645 hours. The sprawling base sat against the Rockies, all razor wire and checkpoints and institutional authority. She parked in the visitor lot, waiting for Marcus. At 1700 exactly, a silver sedan pulled up. Marcus Webb stepped out, and Claire felt a rush of relief. He looked like she remembered. Compact build, graying hair, the kind face that had delivered David's eulogy without breaking. Claire. He approached carefully, hands visible, reading her tension. Thank God you made it. Where's Colonel Chun? Inside. I'll take you to her. He gestured to his car. Leave your truck. It's probably tagged with GPS by now. Something felt wrong. Sergeant's hackles were rising, his body going rigid. Marcus, how did Torres know I was at the library? I told you, they've been watching. No. Her mind was racing now, pieces clicking. Only 3 people knew about that safe. David, me, and whoever he told he was hiding evidence. She backed toward her truck. David didn't trust the chain of command. He wouldn't have told you. Marcus's expression shifted, grief replaced by calculation. Claire, you're paranoid. Sergeant guard. The command came instinctively. The dog positioned himself between her and Marcus, lips peeled back, the stance David had called full threat display. Marcus sighed, and when his hand came out of his jacket, it held a pistol. David was my friend, he said quietly. But he was going to destroy everything. The contracts, the programs, billions in defense spending that keeps this country safe. Morrison made hard choices David couldn't understand. And now you're making the same mistake. Claire felt the truck at her back. So you had him killed. I tried to warn him. He wouldn't listen. Marcus raised the gun. I'm sorry. I really am. But you're going to give me that laptop, and then you're going to take your dog and disappear. Or I shoot the dog first, then you. Your choice. There's a third choice. Claire's voice stayed steady. Sergeant, disarm. The command was one David had taught her during their last leave, half joking, just in case you ever need him to be more than a pet. Sergeant launched, 70-pound missile of teeth and muscle. Marcus fired. The shot went wide, and then the dog hit him, jaws clamping on his wrist. The gun clattered to the pavement. Marcus screamed. Sergeant, release. Guard. The dog obeyed instantly, standing over Marcus, daring him to move. Claire grabbed the gun, hands shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. Around them, the parking lot was empty. Evening shift change, everyone inside. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Visitor lot, northeast corner. Black Jeep. Keys under mat. Drive to MP station. Ask for Colonel Chun. She's real. A friend of David's. Claire looked at Marcus, bleeding and pinned. Who's texting me? Someone else about to make a fatal mistake. But his eyes held fear now. She ran for the Jeep, Sergeant at her heels, laptop clutched against her chest. Found the keys, started the engine. In the mirror, she saw Marcus struggling to his feet, phone to his ear. The MP station was a quarter-mile inside the gate. She pulled up fast, ran inside with Sergeant, and demanded to see Colonel Chun. 5 minutes later, she sat across from a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many lies to buy new ones. Mrs. Mendoza, Colonel Chun said quietly, I've been waiting 8 months for you. Claire set the laptop on the desk between them. Then let's finish this. Colonel Chun worked through the night with a speed that spoke of preparation, like she'd been building a case and just needed the final pieces. Claire sat in a secure conference room, drinking bad coffee and watching through glass as military police and federal investigators arrived in waves. Sargent lay at her feet, finally calm, finally still. At 0200 hours, Shin returned. It's enough. Morrison's being detained. So are 6 contractors, 4 congressional staffers, and 2 DOD officials. Your husband's evidence is airtight. Claire felt nothing, then everything. Her hands started shaking and couldn't stop. Marcus Webb, in custody at Colorado Springs PD. He'll face charges for assault, conspiracy, and accessory to murder if we can prove he knew about the hit on your husband. Shin's voice softened. I'm sorry. I know he was David's friend. So did David. That's what got him killed. Claire looked at Sargent. If the dog hadn't been there. Military working dogs are trained to read situations their handlers can't. Sargent knew Webb was wrong before you did. Shin sat down across from her. Mrs. Mendoza, Claire, what you did took extraordinary courage. But the next part won't be easy. There'll be depositions, testimony, media attention. Morrison's lawyers will come after David's reputation, try to paint him as unstable or insubordinate. You'll need to be strong. I've been strong for 8 months. Claire's voice cracked. I'm tired. I know. Shin slid a card across the table. My personal number. You call anytime, day or night. You're not alone in this. But Claire had been alone since the day the casualty notification officers appeared at her ranch. She'd just gotten better at pretending otherwise. The trial took 6 months. Claire testified 3 times, each appearance picking at scabs that wouldn't heal. The media called her the widow who brought down a general, turning her grief into headline fodder. Reporters camped at her ranch until she stopped answering the door, stopped checking messages, stopped pretending the attention was anything but violation. Morrison's defense painted David as a troubled Marine who'd stolen classified information for personal gain. They implied Claire had fabricated evidence, that her grief had twisted into delusion. The accusations were calculated, professional, devastating. But the evidence didn't lie. Financial records, audio recordings, testimony from soldiers who'd survived the corrupted supply chains, and altered mission reports. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and came back with guilty verdicts on 17 counts. Morrison got 25 years. Claire felt nothing. She returned to the ranch on an October afternoon when the aspens had turned gold and the first snow dusted the high peaks. The house was exactly as she'd left it, empty, quiet, full of ghosts. She stood in the bedroom closet, looking at the space where the safe had been, now just floorboards and shadows. Sargent pressed against her leg, grounding her the way he'd done for 8 months. We did it, she whispered. We finished what he started. The dog's tail swung once, certain. But finishing didn't feel like victory. It felt like an ending, and Claire didn't know what came after endings. The knock came 2 weeks later. Claire almost didn't answer. She'd learned to hate unexpected visitors. But Sargent went to the door wagging instead of growling, so she followed. A woman stood on the porch, maybe 50, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. Mrs. Mendoza? I'm Helen Morrison, the general's wife. Claire's hand tightened on the doorframe. You should leave. Please. Just 5 minutes. Helen's voice cracked. I need to say something. Against her better judgment, Claire stepped onto the porch. Sargent positioned himself between them, watchful. Helen took a shaky breath. I didn't know. For 28 years, I didn't know what Theodore was doing. And when the truth came out, I wanted to hate you. Blame you for destroying our life. Tears tracked down her face. But you didn't destroy anything. You just exposed what was already rotten. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what my husband did to yours. David was a good man trying to do the right thing, and he paid for it with his life. The apology hung between them, inadequate and necessary. Why come here? Claire asked quietly. Because you deserve to hear it. And because. Helen fumbled in her purse, pulled out an envelope. Theodore kept a journal. The lawyers found it during discovery. There's an entry about David, about the decision to eliminate him. He wrote that he regretted it. That David reminded him of who he used to be before the corruption. I had to make you a copy. I don't know if it helps, but you should have it. Claire took the envelope with numb fingers. Does it say why? Why David specifically? Because David wouldn't compromise. Morrison wrote that he tried to buy him, threaten him, reason with him. But your husband wouldn't bend. He said that kind of integrity was dangerous in a world that runs on moral flexibility. Helen's voice broke. He was right. David was dangerous, to everything Morrison had built. So he had him killed. The word should have brought rage. Instead, Claire felt something closer to relief. Confirmation. David had died for exactly the reasons she believed, because he was good in a world that punished goodness. "Thank you for coming," she said finally. Helen nodded, turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you won. Glad the truth came out. I just wish it hadn't cost so much." She walked to her car, and Claire watched until she disappeared down the ranch road. That night, Claire sat on the porch with Sargent at her feet and Morrison's journal entry in her hands. The general's handwriting was precise, controlled, even when confessing murder. "Captain Mendoza forced my hand. A better man would have found another way. But I stopped being a better man years ago, and men like Mendoza remind me of that fact. Eliminating him was operationally necessary and personally tragic. I suspect his wife will never understand why I did it. I'm not certain I understand myself anymore." Claire folded the letter, slipped it back in the envelope. Understanding didn't change anything. David was still gone. The ranch was still empty. She was still alone. Except she wasn't alone. Sargent's head rested on her knee, warm and solid and present. "You saved me," she told the doc. "You knew about the safe. Led me to the evidence. Protected me from Marcus. You finished David's mission when he couldn't." Sargent's amber eyes watched her, patient. "So what do we do now?" The question sat unanswered while the sun set behind the mountains and the temperature dropped toward freezing. Claire pulled David's jacket tighter and thought about the past 8 months. The grief, the investigation, the trial, the hollow victory of justice without joy. She thought about the ranch, which needed work she'd been avoiding. Fences to mend, horses to train, a life to rebuild. She thought about the email she'd received yesterday from Colonel Chun. A friend runs a program placing retired MWDs with veteran families. They need foster coordinators. Thought you might be interested. Military working dogs who'd served their country and now needed someone to help them transition home. Dogs like Sargent, carrying scars and trauma and the weight of missions they couldn't forget. Dogs who needed someone who understood. Claire looked at Sargent, at his notched ear and steady gaze. "What do you think, boy? Room here for a few more?" The dog's tail thumped against the porch. "Once, twice, certain." "Okay then." She pulled out her phone, opened the email, started typing a response. "Let's give them what David gave you. A home, a purpose, a second chance." The words felt right in a way nothing had felt right for months. She sent the email, then sat back and let herself imagine it. The ranch full of dogs learning to be dogs again. Veterans visiting to work with them. The barn converted to training space. Life returning to a place that had felt dead since the casualty officers knocked on her door. It wouldn't bring David back. Wouldn't erase the corruption or the murder or the 8 months of grief. But it would be something good built from something broken. Legacy instead of loss. "We'll start in spring," she told Sargent. "Get through winter first, fix up the barn, build proper kennels. Then we bring them home." The dog settled against her feet, content. Above them, stars wheeled across a sky so clear it hurt. Claire pulled David's jacket tighter and let herself cry. Not the desperate, hollow sobs of early grief, but something quieter, more complicated. Sadness mixed with relief, rage mixed with purpose, ending mixed with beginning. David had asked her to finish what he started. She had. The evidence had destroyed Morrison, exposed the corruption, saved lives by preventing future betrayals. Justice had been served, even if it couldn't bring back the dead. But more than that, David had given her Sargent. And Sargent had given her a reason to keep going when giving up would have been easier. The dog had shown her that loyalty and love survived even death. That purpose could be found in the ruins of tragedy. That home wasn't a person or a place, but a promise. To keep going, to keep fighting, to keep choosing life even when life hurt beyond measure. "Thank you," she whispered to the darkness, to David, to the dog at her feet, to whatever force had given her the strength to open that safe and see the mission through. "Thank you for trusting me." Sargent's tail thumped once more, final as an amen. Claire stood, feeling the cold in her bones, but also something else, possibility. The ranch needed work. She needed work. And somewhere out there were dogs who needed homes, and she had home to give. The past was finished. The trial was over. Morrison was in prison, and David's name was cleared, and the truth was known. Now came the part where she learned to live again. She opened the door, and Sargent followed her inside, into the house that was starting to feel less like a tomb and more like a beginning. Tomorrow she'd call the program, start making plans, begin the work of building something that mattered. Tonight, she'd sleep. For the first time in 8 months, Claire Mendoza believed that would be enough.